Imagine waking up to a spring morning that feels wrong. The air is heavy, pressing against your skin with a strange, stagnant weight. The sun rises, but it is not the golden orb you know. It is a bruised, angry red, fighting to pierce through a haze that smells of sulfur and burnt leaves. You go about your work, tending to the fields, opening the shop, marching in the drill line, waiting for the morning mist to burn off. But it doesn't burn off. It thickens. By 10 a.m., the light has turned a sickly, coppery yellow, casting long, distorted shadows that make the familiar world look alien. By 11 a.m., the birds stop singing. The cows, confused and frightened, walk back to the barns, mooing for their evening feed. And then, at high noon, the moment when the sun should be at its zenith, blazing down upon the world, the unthinkable happens. The light fails completely. A curtain of impenetrable blackness slams down over the land. You look at your hand in front of your face and you cannot see it. You look to the sky for comfort, but the sky is gone. In the middle of the day, in the middle of a war, the world has ended. This is not a scene from a science fiction movie. This is not a biblical parable. This happened. On May 19, 1780, across the fledgling United States of America, the sun simply refused to shine, and millions of people were convinced that Judgment Day had finally arrived. To truly grasp the sheer, suffocating terror of that Friday in May, you must first strip away the comforts of the modern world. You have to transport yourself back to the fragile mindset of 1780. The United States was not yet a superpower. It was a rough collection of battered colonies fighting a desperate, exhausting war for independence against the British Empire. General George Washington was encamped in Morristown, New Jersey, watching his starving, ragged army dwindle under the strain of a harsh winter. The psychological fabric of the people was already frayed. They were tired of war, tired of death, and deeply, intensely religious. For these people, nature was not merely a system of weather patterns, it was the handwriting of God. If the crops failed, it was a punishment for sin. If a storm struck, it was a divine test. So when the atmosphere began to shift on the morning of May 18th, the day before the darkness, people didn't just check a barometer, they checked their souls. It began in the northern territories, drisking down from the wild, unmapped borders of Canada into Vermont and New Hampshire. For days, a relentless wind had been blowing from the southwest, carrying a scent that unnerved the local woodsmen. Some described it as sooty, a thick, acrid smell like a chimney that hadn't been cleaned in years. Others swore it smelled sulfurous, a scent dangerously associated with hellfire. The sun went down on the evening of the 18th, looking like a great swollen drop of blood, casting long crimson shadows that seemed to bruise the landscape. When the morning of the 19th broke, the inhabitants of New England, from the rocky coasts of Maine down to the farmlands of New Jersey, woke up to a sky that felt claustrophobic. The clouds were not the typical cumulus white or storm front gray. They were a rusty, dirty iron color, heavy with an unseen weight. They hung impossibly low, skimming the tops of the white church steeples, trapping the humidity and the smell of smoke against the earth. As the morning progressed, a strange and disturbing phenomenon occurred. The quality of the light began to fracture. It wasn't just getting dark, the color spectrum itself was breaking down. As the sun struggled to pierce the thick particulate matter in the atmosphere, the light that did get through was warped. Witnesses watched in horror as the white paint on their colonial saltbox houses appeared to turn a sickly, vibrant green. The lush spring grass of the village greens turned a dull, muddy blue. But most terrifying of all were the people. Under this alien light, the faces of neighbors and family members looked ghastly and pale, their skin taking on the waxen, grayish hue of walking corpses. The world had become a sepia-toned nightmare. In the diaries of the time, preserved in historical societies today, witnesses recorded a creeping sense of doom. A Harvard professor, attempting to apply reason to the chaos, went outside to examine the rain that had begun to fall. He noted that the water collected from the roofs was thick and black, leaving a soot-like scum on the surface of the rain barrels. The very rain was tainted, resembling ink more than water. To the superstitious mind, it looked as though the sky was weeping ash. Then came the darkness. It didn't fall gradually like a sunset. It rushed in with the speed of a closing curtain. Between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., a massive, palpable shadow swept from the north, engulfing town after town. In Boston, the bustling activity of the port ground to a halt. Shopkeepers were forced to bolt their shutters and light oil lamps at midday. In the countryside of Connecticut, farmers abandoned their plows in the middle of the furrows, unyoking oxen that were lowing in confusion. The darkness became so profound that a sheet of white paper held inches from the eyes was rendered invisible. Panic, raw and unfiltered, spread like a contagion. You must remember, there was no national weather service, no telegraph, no radio, and certainly no internet. There was no way to know if this was a local weather event or if it was happening across the entire globe. The isolation was absolute. Women rushed into the dirt streets, gathering their children who were playing in the gloom, weeping and reciting prayers. Men, usually stoic and hardened by the brutality of the Revolutionary War, flooded the taverns, not to drink, but to ask for news. They found the taverns lit by candles at lunchtime, filled with hushed, fearful whispers. The churches filled up instantly, the bells ringing out peals of alarm. The pews were packed with terrified citizens begging for absolution, convinced that the prophecies of the book of Revelation were unfolding before their eyes. They recited the verses from memory. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. To them, it wasn't a metaphor. It was literally happening.
In the midst of this hysteria, a legendary moment of American stoicism occurred in the Connecticut State Legislature. The darkness had penetrated the council chambers in Hartford. The tall windows had turned into black squares, offering no view of the outside world. The members of the House were trembling, whispering among themselves that the day of judgment was at hand. A motion was quickly made to adjourn the session so that the men could go home, be with their families, and prepare their souls for the end of days. But Abraham Davenport, a councilman and a judge, stood up. He was a man of iron will, and his voice cut through the murmurs of fear like a blade. "I am against the adjournment," Davenport declared, the room falling silent to hear him. "The day of judgment is either approaching or it is not. If it is not, there is no cause for adjournment. If it is, I choose to be found doing my duty. I wish, therefore, that candles may be brought." It was a moment of profound defiance, an imposition of order in the face of absolute chaos. Candles were brought in, and the session continued, a tiny island of bureaucratic light in a sea of inexplicable shadow. Davenport's refusal to bow to panic became a defining anecdote of the New England character. But outside the council chambers, where reason held no sway, the natural world was reacting with biological confusion. The circadian rhythms of the animal kingdom were shattered. Roosters, deceived by the sudden darkness and the subsequent fluctuations in light, crowed at 1 p.m., thinking a new dawn had arrived, only to fall silent again in confusion. Cows walked voluntarily to the barns, lowing to be milked hours ahead of schedule. Frogs in the marshes began their evening peeping chorus. Nightbirds, owls, and whippoorwills came out to hunt in the middle of the day, their calls echoing through the darkened towns and adding a ghostly soundtrack to the human panic. Flowers that bloom only in the sunlight, like dandelions, closed their petals tight. It was as if nature itself had decided to skip a day. The darkness persisted through the afternoon. It was what John Milton might have called darkness visible, a heavy, choking gloom that seemed to absorb sound as well as light. Travelers on the roads were forced to stop, unable to see their horses' heads or the ruts in the road. Military movements ground to a halt. Soldiers sat by their campfires, cleaning muskets, wondering if the war even mattered anymore. General Washington, in his diary, noted the strange weather, though he was further south, where the effect was less total, appearing more like a heavy, unnatural storm front. But for the millions in New England, time had stopped. They waited for the trumpet of the archangel. They waited for the fire, but there was no fire, just the silence. As evening approached, the fear morphed into a new shape. If the sun had failed them, what would happen when night actually fell? Would it be a darkness so absolute that it would suffocate them? When the clock struck the hour of sunset, the moon rose, but it was not the moon they knew. Those who could glimpse it through the breaks in the thick cloud cover recoiled in horror. It was a full moon, but it was blood red, glowing with a malevolent heat at the center, rimmed with a strange, sickly yellow. It provided no illumination. The night of May 19, 1980 was recorded as the darkest night in American history. People couldn't see the ground beneath their feet. To move was a risk injury. The world had been erased. Sleep was impossible for many. They sat by their hearths, feeding the fires, watching the windows, waiting to see if the sun would ever return. It was a collective holding of breath, a society-wide grapple with the fragility of existence. They realized, perhaps for the first time, how dependent they were on the celestial mechanics they took for granted. Then, the morning of May 20th arrived. The sky was gray, the sun was pale and misty, but it was there. The light returned. The birds sang, shaking off the confusion of the previous day. The paralysis broke. A wave of euphoria washed over New England, followed quickly by an insatiable curiosity. If it wasn't the apocalypse, then what was it? For more than a century, New England's dark day remained a mystery, a favorite topic of folklore and farmers' almanacs. Theories ranged from a solar eclipse, which was impossible as the moon was full, to a planetary transit, to divine intervention. It wasn't until modern science began to look backward that the puzzle pieces were finally put together. Researchers at the University of Missouri, analyzing tree rings from ancient timbers in the Algonquin Highlands of Ontario, Canada, found the answer written in the wood. The year 1780 showed massive scarring, evidence of a catastrophic fire. The dark day was not a supernatural event, it was a meteorological perfect storm. Massive wildfires had erupted in the untouched, dense forests of Canada. These were not the controlled fires of today, these were infernos, consuming millions of acres. The heat was so intense, it pushed smoke high into the stratosphere. At the same time, a low-pressure system stalled over New England, creating a temperature inversion. This weather phenomenon occurs when a layer of warm air sits on top of a layer of cold air, trapping everything beneath it like a lid on a pot. The smoke from Canada, heavy with ash and soot, drifted south and was forced down, squeezed between the cloud deck and the ground. The sunlight hit the top of the clouds, but it couldn't penetrate the dense slurry of smoke and moisture. The light was scattered, stripped of its blue wavelengths, leaving only the red and yellow, creating the copper sky. When the smoke layer became too thick, it simply blocked the sun entirely. The soot in the rainwater was ash. The smell of sulfur was burning pine resin. The red moon was the result of light filtering through heavy particulate matter, the same reason the sun looks red during modern wildfires in California or Australia. The mystery was solved by science, but the memory of the terror remains etched in the American psyche. It serves as a reminder of a time when the boundary between the natural world and the supernatural was thin, and when a change in the wind could bring a nation to its knees in prayer. As we look back at May 19, 1780 from our modern vantage point of satellites and radar, it is easy to dismiss the fear of those colonial farmers as primitive superstition. We know it was smoke. They thought it was God. But pause for a moment and consider the fragility that the dark day exposed. In a single afternoon, the most basic constant of human existence, the daylight, was taken away. The economy stopped, the military stopped, rationality gave way to primal fear. It serves as a humbling reminder that for all our technology, for all our cities and our wars and our politics, we are still small creatures living on a planet that can turn off the lights whenever it chooses. The dark day was a dress rehearsal for a world without a sun, a brief glimpse into an abyss that humanity has always feared. It reminds us that civilization is a thin veneer, easily cracked by the whims of the atmosphere. And perhaps, if the sky were to turn black tomorrow, if our phones lost signal and the sun refused to rise, we would find ourselves standing just where they did in 1780, huddled by a candle, waiting, watching, and praying for the dawn. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more hidden history, real mysteries, and untold stories. Let us know in the comments what kind of story you'd like to see next. Your ideas shape future videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.